Okay, if I could get everybody to sit down, please, so we could get started, because I only have an hour and 10 minutes. And usually these presentations take much, much longer, so I'm going to do my best to condense it for you and still be able to give you the information that I think is important. All right, let's get started. I am detective. I'm a senior detective. My name's Hector Sanchez. I already introduced myself. I want to give you a little bit about my background so that hopefully we have a lot of commonalities between us. So I just share a little bit about myself. I joined the Los Angeles Police Department in 1994, and since then I've worked various assignments from patrol. Most of them have been in investigations though. I promoted to the rank of detective and kept on promoting within that rank. So right now I am like the senior detectives in our unit. I run a unit. I manage a group of investigators that go out and do investigations. We do them as a team, so our successes are their successes are my successes, their failures are my failures, and vice versa. Whatever happens in my unit, we own it. And sometimes we only have one opportunity to get it right. So the reason, I like to first start with a little bit about my experience, because in my career, early on, I think if somebody would have asked or told me, one day you're going to be working animal cruelty, I wouldn't have believed them, okay? When I teach this course to our police officers, I get the strangest questions when I start. Sometimes they ask me, how many pets do you own? And, how do I take care of a certain ailment that my dog has, like with a skin condition, or what type of food do I need to buy it? And honestly, I don't know the answer to that question. A lot of people think that because I work the animal cruelty and I am the supervisor of that unit, that I own animals, that I own a lot of animals, cats, dogs, you name it. The truth is, I don't own any animals. I don't have any pets. I don't even have a goldfish. I think if I did have a goldfish, I don't think it would do that good. So I don't own any animals. But might be a good thing. And the reason I say that is because you don't have to be passionate about animals. What you do have to be passionate about is your job, wanting to find the truth. And that is the driving force, I think, across, the world in terms of law enforcement, our brotherhood. We are driven by the truth, seeking justice, and, of course, protecting public safety. So I think that's one of the things that I wanted to share with you first. So what I'm going to do in my presentation, I'm going to go over some cases that we have. The good as well as the bad, bad practices, best practices. But also I want to hear from you. I want you to tell me about your experiences, whether or not what I'm saying is something that you already do, or if you never heard about it. I want to learn too. I'm here to learn just like you are. And I'm just here to share my experiences, and I'm hoping that you share your experiences with me. All right, so in moving forward, first case I want to talk about is the Alex Hernandez case. All right, it's a pretty good case that happened recently, and most of these cases that I'm going to talk about are recent cases. They're not something that we had to, get from the vault and try to decipher what happened. These are recent cases that we were, as the task force, involved with. But before I do that, I think it's important to realize that animal cruelty, at least for me in my unit, is a tool. It's an investigative tool. Yes, we do care about the animals, the welfare of the animals, but as investigators, as professionals, we work with what we have, and so it's a great tool. I always refer to animal cruelty as warning bells. There are warning bells of future calamities to come if we don't do our job right. And as you'll see, sometimes if you don't do it right, they'll haunt you. And they'll haunt you for a long time, and you'll lose a lot of sleep. So, I'll start off with this case and how it happened, and I'm going to take it in a chronological order so you could see how the case developed, how it unfolded. So working the task force, we're on 24/7. Even though we have standard hours, we constantly respond off hours. If patrol needs our assistance, they need our expertise. As much as I like to think that, us in law enforcement, we have all the answers to everything, the truth is we don't. And maybe like your department, like my department, there are so many policies out there that it's almost impossible to know them all. So we are a specialized unit, and patrol really counts on us to be there. So on this particular day, on August 23rd, last year, we got a call, at home about a shooting that happened involving dogs. In the city of LA, this happens quite a bit. You've probably seen in movies, all these guns being fired and all these gang wars, all this violence that we have. Some of it is true. We are fixated in a way with our weapons. It's not a matter, when we show up to a place, is not who has weapons, but who doesn't have weapons. It's very common. We don't have some of the laws that you have here, where you have to have a permit and so forth to own a gun. Over there, if you're 18 years old, and if you don't have any felony convictions, you could get a gun quite easily. So in this instance, we were drawn to this case because it was unusual. The firearm that was used was a shotgun. Most of the animal shootings that we have is always some small caliber gun, 22, 38, 9 millimeter, occasional 45, but a shotgun, very unusual. So we decided that we were going to go investigate this case. This is what we found when we got there. There was 2 dead dogs that had been killed, that had been shot. And there was another dog that had been injured. And if you look at the door, the black door, you see a pattern. That's a typical shotgun pattern. There was 3 shots, as you see, 2 high and then 1 in the middle. Both of those dogs died instantly. But it was unusual for us. Anybody familiar with this? Anybody know what we're looking at? Any firearm experts in here? Nobody? Okay, so what we have here is trajectory. We have a forensic team that we called out so that they could tell us the pattern of the bullets, the fragments that went into this door. As you see in the back, there's these little tablets, little silver tablets. We put those on to measure where the bullets struck, in addition to where the dogs got hit. This is important information because of the expectation. Just like homicide investigations, you have a crime scene. Animal cruelty is no different. You do the same thing. The only difference is you're substituting a human, for a dog, but you investigate it the exact same way. Best practices, you collect evidence, trace evidence, ballistic evidence, video if you have it, but you don't treat it any different because again, that's the expectation that the courts have of us. And when we don't do this, good things don't result out of that. So in this case, our lucky break came when we found out that the homeowner had video. And he had installed video for a reason, right? Most people that install video in their home is for a reason. He had a very good reason. He was in fear that his family was going to be harmed by a local gang member, or gang, I should say. So they installed these cameras, which captured the entire incident as it happened. So you actually see the suspect get out of his car, go back into his car, and from his car he fired the gun into where the dogs were. You can actually see him from the other side. And he killed the dogs, which was very interesting, for us because just the manner that it happened. Well, right after this, we decided that we were going to canvass the area for that vehicle description to see maybe if he lived nearby. We did have some information that he did live a couple of miles away, so through driving around the streets, we actually found the car. Yeah, through our luck, it was in the back of a house. We saw the car, and we had a pretty good idea who it was. It was a known gang member. That information was confirmed when we got back to the station, and we started doing, a background on that address. So we were pretty confident that we had our dog shooter, which wasn't anything unusual at the time. That this things happen in LA quite a bit. Most of the time, it's neighbors that are upset at one another, their dog's barking too much, or their dog becomes a nuisance, so they take the law into their own hands and they'll kill the dog. In this case, we thought there was something going on with the family. So it wasn't anything unusual. All right, this is a picture of a necropsy. So what a necropsy is very similar to an autopsy, right? So when somebody gets killed and you want to investigate the case and you want to prosecute the case, you have to prove what the person died of, right, through the coroner's report. So once you get the cause of death, you're able to rule whether it was intentional, whether it was a homicide or accidental, and so forth. Well, animal cruelty is no different. You still need that medical report. You still need that expertise, which is extremely valuable, because it doesn't matter what forensic work you did out in the field in terms of your crime scene. If you don't have the medical experts to back you up and say, yeah, that dog really did die from a shotgun, you really don't have a chance in court. And like I said, our court systems have come to expect this from us. We need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these dogs were killed intentionally. And a lot of times, 100% of the time, we rely on the expert opinion of the vets, the veterinarians. They play a tremendous role in our investigations. They're able to refute a lot of what our suspects say. Some of them, like in some cases, they'll say, well, the dog just fell from stairs, or it got run over, or it's not what you think, something else happened. Well, the medical report, it's going to be very specific. It's going to tell you exactly what that dog died of. So it's extremely valuable. We could not have a task force if it wasn't for our veterinary partners. And in fact, the prosecutors won't file that case if you don't have that medical report. Okay, so we find out who this person is, and we are working most of the night. We feel confident that we could come back in the morning, first thing in the morning, on a Sunday, and write the search warrant to go into this guy's house to get the fruits of the crime, right? The shotgun, the shell, the casings, the clothing that he was wearing in the video, his car, just process all the evidence we can from his house. That night we got extra protection for the family, so we were confident that the family was protected. So the next morning, me and my partner were writing the search warrant, and something that I'll never forget, I think as long as I'm alive, is as I'm writing the warrant, Captain Moldorfer calls me, because in LAPD, and I didn't have it at the time, but she did, we get notifications on our phone on significant incidents throughout the city. So if something significant happens, you get notified automatically by email on your phone what's happening. She called me around 6 in the morning, or approximately, and she tells me, have you been monitoring what's happening in San Fernando Valley, where this is where this was occurring? And I said, no, I've been busy writing the search warrant. She says, well, you better listen to the radio and maybe call the watch commander at that particular division. Maybe you might call it precinct. Or so I do, and I learn that morning, which we thought at this point is our suspect, because of the way that he was going around killing people, because that's what he did. Early in the morning, before we knew it, he was going around randomly killing people. They got a vague description of his car, not of the person, but just the car, and the manner that these people were killed. I was pretty confident that that was our guy, that he went out in the morning before we executed the search warrant and started killing people. Warning bells, yeah. Did we hear these warning bells? We did. We thought that we had it under control and it wasn't going to be this, but it ended up being that. What we didn't know is that this person had a history of violence. Had we had this information, most definitely we would have done things differently. But we didn't. We thought we were moving in the right direction, but unbeknownst to us, we weren't. For example, what we didn't know is that between April 27th and June 15th of last year, he was randomly shooting people. He had been doing this for a while. In one of those cases in May, and this struck home because I have a son around this particular victim's age. It's part of a rite of passage when you're in school, in high school, that toward the end of your high school education, you go to a ball, right? A dance. It's called a prom. Well, this particular young man took a girl to the dance, and was dropping her off at home later that day. And for some unknown reason, this car pulled up next to him and shot him with a shotgun. Didn't kill him, but paralyzed him. And I remember hearing this in the news when it happened. I did feel really bad for this individual because, to live paralyzed for the rest of your life, pretty significant event. Of course, he also, on August 20th, he fired randomly in 2 cars. And this was occurring all over the county. It wasn't just an LAPD jurisdiction, but it was in the surrounding areas. I didn't know this. Also, on August 21st, as a man was going to work early in the morning, a car had pulled up next to him and shot him with a shotgun, killed him right at the stop sign. I'm sorry, it wasn't a stop sign, it was a red light. He was at a red light, the guy pulls up next to him, shoots him randomly, kills him. I didn't know that. So what happened is, you're going to see in this video, and just to put it into perspective, because I don't think the translator is going to translate this, things started moving really fast on this case.
Considering him a one-man wrecking crew.
And hopefully,
they say he's responsible for 3 shootings this past Sunday morning on Selleck Street in San Fernando, Borden Avenue in Sylmar, and Fillmore Avenue in Pacoima, where 3 people were killed. We're talking 2 in the LA Police Department territory and 1 in San Fernando City. Again, 3 killings in 3 locations. They believe he is the only person responsible at this time. They do not have any indication as to his motive. We're expecting to hear that shortly when the news conference begins. Again, we have executives and brass from all 3 agencies: San Fernando, the LA Sheriff's Department, and of course the host agency, the LAPD. Speaking about Mr. Hernandez, who is jailed right now on $1 million bail. And other developments today regarding Mr. Hernandez, he was just charged by the LADA in connection with the attempted murder of 2 people who were fired upon in West Hollywood, sitting in their car last Friday night. And 1 day prior, the murder of a man in Pacoima, where I understand Mr. Hernandez was charged with that today, again from LADA Jackie Lacey. A complicated case, 1 man allegedly responsible. They tell us the common denominator there was his gold or tan SUV, that vehicle taken into custody Sunday evening, after which he was arrested in Sylmar, a standoff with LAPD SWAT detectives. Again, more information forthcoming from the news conference that is yet to begin right here downtown at LAPD headquarters. I'm Beverly White, standing by live. Back to you in the studio.
We're tracking breaking news. The LAPD is releasing new details now about the man they say went on that random shooting spree, killing 4 people over the weekend, and more cases could be connected to this accused gunman.
NBC4's Beverly White is live at LAPD headquarters with more now on what investigators just revealed. Beverly. Carolyn, the LAPD tells.
So hopefully you got some of the translation on that video. This case received a lot of press conference, media coverage, as it should. It was a significant incident because of these acts were so random. Who would have ever imagined this, right? I mean, we go from a simple dog shooting to a deranged person who's violently killing people in a very horrific way, by the way, considering the ammunition he was using. So let me go back to this. So at the end of this video, there's actually, it goes on for a while, but one of the things that was brought forth was that it was because of the animal cruelty investigation that we were able to identify who this person was. And in fact, detectives from all over the neighboring jurisdictions were looking for him. They just did not have a person. They had the car, which in the LA area, there are so many cars of that make and model. I mean, it's a very, very common car. But it was through the animal cruelty case that we're able to actually identify him and get him arrested. During the arrest, the execution of the search warrant, it could have gone really bad because he barricaded himself inside of his house with his shotgun and his family. It took our special weapons and tactics team, which is a specialized unit that deals with these high-profile, dangerous incidents, to go in and try to negotiate for literally the hostages that he had in there. They finally did. He let him go, and toward the end of the night, he tried escaping through the back by jumping over a fence with a shotgun, a Benelli shotgun on his, kind of like strapped to him. He wasn't shot, luckily, but we ended up arresting him. And at the end of the day, when he was being put into the ambulance, because we ended up tasing him. A taser is like these electric shocks. That get sent out. They're like projectiles, and they slightly send an electrical impulse which immobilizes the person. Well, as for caution, we put him in an ambulance, but it was satisfying when I stepped in and I actually told him he was under arrest for killing 3 dogs. At that point, we did not have the entire picture of what had happened and why in terms of the killings, but we knew that was forthcoming. So some of the common themes in animal cruelty that we have here is, the behavior, and that's what we really focus on, is the behavior. Yes, what he did to those dogs, no dog should really have to die like that. But as an investigator, I'm more focused in regards to what's happening in this person's life that's causing him to be so violent. And as you heard, there are some common themes in animal cruelty. One of them is drug, alcohol abuse. Yeah, he definitely had that. And he was a very violent person, extremely violent. He was a gang member, very proud of being a gang member. And this was just one of many things, bad things that this person has done in his life. It makes you wonder, what else he's done that he wasn't arrested for. Now, everything I told you about this case is public record in so much that it's been given to the media already. This case is going to go on for a very long time in court. It is a capital murder case, which means that if convicted, he faces execution, by whatever means, which usually takes a very, very long time in the United States to happen, if it happens. It's more, I think, of a symbolic thing now when somebody gets convicted of capital murder. In California, at least. There are some other states that do take that very seriously. So some of the things we found out about him is that he was very proficient with firearms, extremely proficient. There was a lot of displaced anger, and these are like hypotheses as to why he was doing it. He never wanted to talk to us. He never submitted to an interview. But based on what we learned, we do believe that he had a lot of displaced anger issues, which is a very common theme with animal cruelty. It's also a very common theme, like in psychology. It's called displacement, right? You're mad at something and you take it out on the dog. You go kick the dog because you're mad at maybe you lost your job or something happens, displaced anger. Some of the investigative challenges in this case, obviously there was no pattern. There was nothing that we could say, oh yeah, he likes killing a certain type of person, a certain race, a certain color hair, a certain, male, female. No, these acts were completely random, which made it extremely difficult to identify him earlier. But again, I think sometimes things happen for a reason. Killing the dogs was a lucky break for us. The video was really a vital piece of information. Without that, we wouldn't have made the case. What about here, in Greece? I understand that you don't have too much video. Could anybody answer that question for me? No, I see some heads going no. Hold on.
Μπορείτε να πάρετε το μικρόφωνο ένα λεπτάκι να σε ακούσω.
We don't have much video for these matters.
They don't have much video here in Greece.
Okay, video is very valuable to us. With technology, there really isn't much of a reason for us not to have it. We give up so much of our private information to social media anyway. It's a give and take. We do value our freedoms, our privacy, but at the same time, you have to weigh what really is important, what you're willing to give up to be safer. That's something that we had a struggle with. And as I mentioned earlier, now our police officers, we're mandated to have cameras. They have these cameras on them, and everywhere they go, they're filming. So we know exactly what happens. And I think we've gone to that other extreme because it's causing all sorts of other problems. But it is good. It's good information to have. And I think over time, you might move that direction. Like I said, it's valuable evidence to have. Any other questions? Yes.
Το μικρόφωνο, ένα λεπτάκι, περιμένετε το μικρόφωνο.
I just want to mention that even though Greek police departments, they don't use videos, journalists are giving videos and photos for such crimes.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me just talk on that. But here's what I'm doing. If you guys are asking me questions, I brought you a little memento. So did you get it? Perfect. I brought you little badges from LAPD. So if you happen to ask me a question, I will give you one. But I only have 7. So hopefully it's a competition and I get a lot of questions. With technology nowadays, especially in Los Angeles, these phones are amazing. We have people recording things that are so unbelievable, but they're recording everything. With us in law enforcement, we expect that we're going to be recorded every single time. When we step out of the patrol car, we're on stage. We know that somebody is recording us, just waiting for that moment where we lose it, right? Where we do something controversial. For the most part, I hope we don't. But as you've probably seen in the media, sometimes, human nature, we're having a bad day and things happen. So it kind of works against us too in law enforcement. But as evidence, this is a very valuable tool. And I would encourage, the public to videotape. And I said, if they videotape and you have the video, you really don't need them so much to come up to court and so forth. You might have to, at least in where we work. It's always better to have the witness, the person that filmed it. But sometimes you could kind of get away with it, with not having that. Okay, so with this case, moving on, all right, so Alex Hernandez, he eventually got charged with 5 counts of capital murder. He got charged with other crimes as well, attempted murder. They have him on other cases that they're looking into, so we have not seen the last of the prosecution on this particular person. Every time I run into our homicide people, they always tell me, hey, we got another case. We got another case on your guy, you know, on Hernandez. So it's kind of a bittersweet, because you do a lot of the what ifs, you know, and you can't help it. We're police officers, and we always try to think, you know, what if I would have done that? What if I would have, you know, done this? Yeah, and I have lost a lot of sleep over this one. All right, so we did get recognized for actually being the unit that identified this serial killer, and which was, like I said, it was good for the unit, but it's kind of one of these bittersweet things. You hope it never gets to that. You know, our goal in animal cruelty is to prevent these things from happening. And like I mentioned earlier, animal cruelty are great warning bells for you. A lot of what we do in law enforcement is reactive, isn't it? Somebody gets run over, you respond, you take a report, you do an investigation. You know, somebody gets hurt, domestic violence, you know, we respond, we do an investigation. There are very little tools in law enforcement that are actually, that we could use to kind of predict what's going to happen. And if you're, after a while, you know, it almost becomes like second nature. You develop that skill set where if you see something, you know something's not right, and you know that you better address it, or society is going to have to bear the consequences of us not doing anything. And that is a very heavy load to carry. So with the Alex Hernandez case, you know, it's a team effort. It's not just animal cruelty, it's animal services, it's the vet, it's the fire department that rolls out when this person was arrested, it's the prosecutors, you know, it's the forensic lab work that was done with the ballistics, with the trace evidence, and of course, again, you know, the vets, the veterinarians, because I still need to prove that these dogs were killed with a shotgun. And the only way I'm going to be able to do that is if I have that expert report. Even though it's pretty obvious, I still need to prove it in court, right? Okay, so...
Hector,
yes.
If you wouldn't mind, I'd just like to summarize very quickly the real significance of this case. And that is to say that when as he mentioned earlier, when a dog gets shot in Los Angeles, it's pretty common. But what was uncommon and what caught our attention was the violent nature of this shooting. Very unusual for someone to use a shotgun to kill a dog, and very unusual for it to be so random. Usually when someone shoots a dog, you know they suspect it was the neighbor, there's an ongoing dispute. This had all the earmarks of a person who was very dangerous and very violent, just in the manner that the dog was killed. So that's why we jumped on this case immediately. Unfortunately, we were unable to keep him from killing another 3 people, but we took him into custody very quickly. So, and then it was very easy to identify him when you have the same individual in a similar area a few hours later shooting humans with a shotgun, which again, people getting shot in Los Angeles, not that unusual. It happens. But not with a shotgun, and it usually has to do with gang violence, or it has a lot of other characteristics that were not present here, which again, just what it meant to us, the way we interpreted it, was that this is a violent, dangerous individual who's randomly shooting people. And random shootings, as I'm sure you know, are random acts, very hard to track and identify because there's no pattern. That was the significance of this case. That's why we brought it up here at the conference.
Okay, yes, a question.
Ένα λεπτάκι το μικρόφωνο.
I'm working for Animal Action, and last weekend, we were on a small island of Greece in Astypalea. We were doing the neutering program. And then someone brought a dog to vet for necropsy. The dog was shot. I have photographed the dog with about 150 little pellets, and then the perpetrator killed it with like an execution. They just shot it here on the back of, opening a hole like that on the body of the animal. So we worked closely with the police, who were very interested in capturing this person, because the police of Astypalea agree with you that this is a very violent and dangerous person. So they're really trying to find him, and they are thinking that it's one of the 3 very violent hunters that they have on the island. I just thought that this will just ascertain exactly what you're saying, that the violent people are all over, and they're always very violent with the animals. Thank you, and sorry for the interruption.
No, thank you for your comment, and that's a good observation to make, is that human nature is human nature. Human violence is human violence. It doesn't matter whether you're in Greece, or United States, or other part of the world. You know, as humans, we do things that are very violent. And in the United States, for some reason, we're a violent bunch out there. You know, like I mentioned earlier, it's not a matter of, who has the guns, but who doesn't have guns when we show up. And they get used, and they get used quite a bit. So I'm going to move on to juvenile crime. Oh, more questions? Yes.
Ήθελα να παρακαλέσω αν μπορείτε να πείτε απλώς ποια είναι η δουλειά που κάνετε και από ποια περιοχή είστε. Από ποια περιοχή είστε.
Είπα αστυνόμος, είμαι Σταμάτ. Ήθελα να ρωτήσω, ο δράστης στην Αμερική,
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question, please?
Ήθελα να ρωτήσω αν ο δράστης στην Αμερική ήταν κυνηγός και αν ναι, πιστεύετε ότι οι κυνηγοί είναι βασανιστές ζώων?
Well, I believe he was a hunter. However, I don't think that in itself is a correlation for animal, like I said, cruelty. It's different. There's different aspects of that. In the United States, people take hunting very seriously. I mean, they're very passionate about it. So I can't say one way or another whether it's not. I don't think so, because if you look at the elements of what animal cruelty is, the intentional maiming, mutilating, torturing, wounding, or killing of an animal, it has to be malice, and it has to be intentional. With hunting, you don't have the malice part. You do have the intentional part.
I would just like to add that as with child abuse, you could say 100% of child abusers were in fact abused as children. But what you can't say is that every person who is abused becomes a child molester, a child abuser. And it's the same thing with people who do cruel things to animals. I don't think we could say that every person who is cruel to an animal is becoming a serial killer or is going to be engaging in violent behavior. But I can tell you that people who engage in violent behavior, if they have an animal, it's probably been abused or tortured in some way. So we're not in any way saying that just because they may engage in some of the activities that we feel are abusive, that they're there's a big dispute in the United States over whether hunting is it's legal, but whether it's cruel to animals or not. There's people who don't believe we should ever hunt. There's other people who take their hunting very seriously. But I can say that my experience with the hunters is they're not generally cruel to the animals, unless you deem shooting the animal to be cruel, but they don't torture. Good hunters don't torture the animals. They are hunting them. They usually take them down with one shot, and which is, you know, I think everyone would agree, a more humane way to do it than some of the things that we've talked about and are going to talk about today. So I wouldn't want to impugn hunters or hunting, or to say that that is in fact animal cruelty. Sometimes maybe, but not usually. In our experience, anyway.
Good question, though. Is there any more questions on the last case study? Yeah, I think we have another question.
Γεια σας και από μένα. Ονομάζομαι Κούτος Αλέξανδρος. Είμαι υπαστηνόμος και υπηρετώ στο αστυνομικό τμήμα της Δράμας. Το επαναλάβω. Γεια σας και από μένα. Ονομάζομαι Κούτος Αλέξανδρος. Είμαι υπαστηνόμος και υπηρετώ στο αστυνομικό τμήμα της Δράμας, στο Γραφείο Γενικής Αστυνόμευσης, που σχετίζεται άμεσα με το σεμινάριο αυτό, το οποίο τιμά τους διοργανωτές και τους ομιλητές, παρεμπιπτόντως. Θα ήθελα να απευθώ ότι τα περιστατικά αυτά της κακοποίησης έχουν να κάνουν διαπράττως σε βάρος δεσποζόμενων ή αδεσποτοζώων. Και όπως ως γνωστόν, εδώ στην ελληνική επικράτεια υπάρχει, ειδικά σε επαρχιακές πόλεις, περιφέρεται μεγάλος αριθμός αδεσποτοζώων. Τι ισχύει στην αλλοδαπή? Μήπως έχει σχέση η περιφορά αυτών των αδέσποτων ζώων με τη θανάτωση πάσης φύσεως? Ευχαριστώ.
Okay, if I understand your question correctly, is do we treat stray animals any different than we do owned animals, pets? We do not. And animal cruelty is animal cruelty, whether the animal has an owner or if it's a stray. We treat it the same. Again, our focus is the violent behavior. It's not really, the ownership of the animal. It's the behavior that we are focusing on. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Moving on to some juvenile crimes. We handle a lot of juveniles that are involved with animal cruelty. And as we indicated earlier, why were juveniles engaged in animal cruelty? Well, time and time again, we see that there's more going on with that individual than most people realize. It is a problem in the United States and in California, Los Angeles in particular. But, animal cruelty, we've gotten kids as young as, 7, 10 years old committing egregious forms of animal cruelty. And we've corrected that behavior. With juveniles, it's not so much that we're interested in sending them to prison. That's not our goal. Our goal is the whole holistic approach to this problem and try to get them the attention that they need so that they could grow up and have a healthy life. Because when you think about it, these juveniles are going to grow up one day and we're going to have to live with them. And they might be somebody's spouses, right? So we owe it to ourselves to get them the help early on, detect this as fast as we can. Having technical difficulties here. There it goes. Okay, if you look at this photo, right, in front of you, do you hear the warning signs, the warning bells that are going off? And if you read what's captured there, they really should be going off. When we found out about this, we got a call from the school because this particular individual used a cell phone to video herself torturing and killing her own cat. She takes it to school and shows it to her classmates. So just let me go on because I don't want to lose my thought process here. So more often than not, we are seeing juveniles do that. And not only are they engaging in these horrific acts, but they're recording them on their cell phone and they're putting them on social media, which causes all sorts of work for us because now we have to do warrants for the social media evidence, which I'm not too sure, and you might have the same problem. Social media doesn't really like police too much. You know, they don't want to cooperate as you would expect. They require search warrant after search warrant after search warrant. Once you think you got the right search warrant, they tell you that no, that video is owned by somebody else, and you have to do another search warrant. It's like peeling an onion. You know, you just keep on peeling and peeling and peeling. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. And I'll tell you why it's worth it. So this person goes to school, shows her friends, well, not really her friends, because she was kind of like a loner, what she's doing. Her friends reported to school officials. School officials contact us, and we immediately jump on this case because we know the significance. And we didn't have this image up to this point. You know, her holding the knife, that came from her cell phone, which we took from her, and we had forensically analyzed. So we get that, and we get the story, and we get statements from the school administrators, from the teachers, from the classmates. We didn't have the forensic evidence like the necropsy, because what had happened in this case is that the cat was thrown out with the garbage. The garbage came, they took it away, we no longer had that. But we were able to build a case with circumstantial evidence. And this was one of these rare cases where the case did get filed. And juvenile crimes are handled more different than adult crimes. I said with juveniles, you know, we have a system that still believes in them. We want to correct their behavior, and we want to give them the resources that they need to live a healthy life. And that really what it's about. Unfortunately, sometimes we do have to incarcerate them, and you know, there's nothing we could do about that. But with this particular individual, you know, the father was not aware of the animal cruelty, and a very common theme that happens with juveniles is that if you look at the household dynamics of what is happening there, more often than not, there are some problems in the household through drug addiction, alcohol addiction, violence. In this particular case, you know, she had been sexually abused, not by her father, but by a neighbor. She was definitely acting out. Her mom was a drug addict. When we did some forensic evidence with her phone, we found child pornography on her phone of her and another individual, you know, a boy. Well, anytime you have child pornography anywhere on your phone, you could get charged for that. That is a very serious crime in the United States. So again, we're looking at what is happening in this household that's making this person do this. Did she have mental illness? Yes, she did. We have a lot of juveniles, offenders that are very violent, and they do have mental illness issues. And I think this is a worldwide problem. It's not just in the United States. What was very scary about this case is that when we started to look into her behavior, we found out that she claimed to be being the victim of a bully or bullying. Multiple students were picking on her at school, and she wanted to get back, you know, to them, which this is probably the #1 cause of our school shootings. You know, we have some horrific school shootings that occur in the United States every year, like clockwork. Every year we have a big shooting at a school, and it doesn't matter whether it's at an elementary school, a high school, a college. It's a target-rich environment that they gravitate to. Often they also commit suicide. So if you don't catch it early on, you know, you run the risk of those things happening. And in this particular case, I think we're successful because we caught it early. And as soon as we identified her, again, the holistic approach, we brought in mental health, they immediately put her on a hold because of her mental capacity. She was very violent, and they put her on a hold. And so when we finally got around to talk to her, you know, we found out that she had a manifesto. So she already had a plan that she was going to go to school and kill some of her classmates by setting them on fire. So it was already in the works. So this happens to be one of our success stories in that we're able to identify it early and prevent a calamity from occurring. Had we ignored the fact that she killed her cat in the way she did, we would have lost this opportunity, and we would have been left to, ponder all the what ifs. And, again, that is a very heavy weight to carry in your life, knowing that you could have prevented something and you didn't. So I know I'm running out of time, but we have a lot of these cases here that are very, very similar. Again, we use a lot of resources when it comes to this. It's not just LAPD. It's Department of Family and Children Services, it's Animal Services, it's the vets, it's the prosecutors, mental health. We throw everything that we can into this problem, because it's not just a law enforcement problem. This is a societal problem. And if we don't know how to deal with it as a whole, we're going to have problems, because in LAPD, we can't do it all. And we don't have all the answers, and we rely on others to help us. Just to give you some idea about the mental illness in the United States, so the lower graph that you see are the attempted suicides of juveniles. We average around 350 a year. These are juveniles that are trying to kill themselves because they're in a mental crisis. Something is happening in their lives where they want to kill themselves. You look at the other graph, the taller graph, and those are the holds that are placed on juveniles in LA City alone. This is not the county, this is not California, this is LA City alone. We average around 850 a year, of kids that we're putting in the hospital for mental illness. And again, I'm not saying all of them are violent, because they're not, but this just goes to show that there is a mental health problem everywhere, I think. It's not just LA. Okay, so I'm moving on to another case, and I'm going to be moving on faster now, because all these cases, after a while, and working many crimes, they all start sounding alike. They kind of blend in, and before you know it, you start mixing them up, because your memory tends to do crazy things, right? Now a case morphs into something because they all start sounding alike. They have common themes, very common themes, to the point where, you get their names confused. You could change them and it'll be the same case. Okay, so everybody see what I'm seeing? If you look at the little square, that's knife. And that was done by somebody with mental illness. He had been diagnosed with mental illness at the age of 6, and he was very violent. He was very violent with the family. He had a history of violence. The family didn't know what to deal with him. They tried many things, medications, sending them to therapy. Nothing seemed to be working. Anybody, just a wild guess out there, anybody could tell me, what do you think drove him to drive this knife into this dog? Anybody could just take a wild guess? No? Okay, so he was upset, again, displaced anger, right, a common theme, because he got a cold. He had a runny nose, wasn't feeling well. This dog had been with the family for a very long time. It was a very loved dog by the parents. They were very attached to the dog. It was almost part of the family. So when the parents went out for dinner, they went to a restaurant, they left him at home, he took this knife and just put it into the dog. Of course, he wants attention, right? So he calls the father and tells his dad, "Hey, Dad, I just want to let you know that I stabbed our dog. You should probably come home." At this point, this dog's still alive. Officers responded, and they take him out. They take the dog to a vet to try to save it. And I'll explain what happened earlier. But again, the common themes, domestic violence, yes, we have it. Mental illness, yes. Is he a violent offender? Yes. He had a history of violence with the family. Drug, alcohol abuse? Yes. We also have a lot of cases with mental illness where they don't want to be diagnosed with mental illness, so they'll self-medicate, right? They'll use illegal drugs. It may not have even been illegal. It could be like alcohol, but they do self-medicate. and is through animal cruelty, actually, in some of these cases, that we're able to identify them and get them treatment. Because if not for the animal cruelty arrest, their mental illness will go undetected. Now, what happens in court sometimes is the judge or the public defender will ask for a psychological evaluation of the defendant because of what he did, because it's so odd. Like, who would do that, right? So in that sense, it's good, and it's good for society, because now we identified a problem, and now we have the tools, hopefully, to get at least to try to get treatment for this individual. Because what's the alternative? To do nothing? You really can't with mentally violent mentals. It's not a good recipe. So I just want to move on. I want to show you this picture. Oop, there it is. So this is good evidence for us, right? So the vet, and thank God for vets, right? They took a picture of this dog, and what you're seeing there in the center is actually the knife that was driven through the dog. Jurors love this stuff. You show a juror that, and you show the picture of the dog, they're going to convict. We have such a high success rate because of this type of evidence. Pictures are really good to show to a jury. I always tell the officers when they call me for advice on how to handle these cases, I said, give me plenty of pictures, and when you think you've exhausted taking pictures, I want you to take more. The more the better, right? Because sometimes you miss things, sometimes, the angle. So pictures are always good. Recordings are always good. Always record your interviews with the suspects, especially in domestic violence cases. Because what's going to happen in domestic violence cases, as you probably know, because it's human nature, right? They're not going to go to court. They're going to lie, and they're motivated not to cooperate. The system is not made, or I said the system actually does work, but unfortunately there are too many factors that come into play in domestic violence. So anything that you could do to help your victim, record and remember what she said or he said, the better. Okay, so the Jesse Palma case. I responded for home on New Year's. Actually, it was pretty close to New Year's when I got there. This was an interesting case because this particular guy stomped this cat. He used this big boot, and if you look at the suspect, he was very short, very wide guy. He weighed approximately 280 pounds. Pretty scary guy, long hair. He had these crazy eyes about him. But he decided he wanted to stomp these cats because he was upset. He woke up in the morning, and the cats had defecated in the house, in the apartment, and he was upset. So he put pressure on them, kind of stomped them. His wife woke up, stopped them. He was upset. He went to work. She got the help from a social worker to call the police. So when the police get there, they see these cats. They really weren't injured, as you would expect. But when he came home, they ended up arresting him for animal cruelty, felony animal cruelty, which was a good thing. Because it's always the unknown, right? It's always the behavior. What are you looking into? And if you look at the person, and you look at what he did, like I said, after a while you develop like this sense, like, no, I need to take action. These are warning signs. There's something not right here. His wife had mental illness, and she had the mental capacity of a 9-year-old. But, they still had a kid together. How's that, right? He had 17 felonies in his criminal history, very violent felonies. He had 6 misdemeanors. But what was most disturbing on this case was what we found out, that he just got out of prison, and he was just out of prison on what's called probation. They let him out early, and they promised to be good and not, be criminals and do violent things, right? With the condition that if they do those things, they're going to go back to prison. Well, it didn't take him long, right? Because he stomped those cats. So we arrested him again, and we're trying to put a case on him. Well, he was on probation because he tried to kill his 1-year-old son by punching him in the face, putting a sock in his mouth, and throwing him to the side to die. If it wasn't for intervention, that kid would have died, but they ended up charging him for attempted murder of his own son. And it was through the animal cruelty case that we were able to put him back in prison. Well, it depends how you see it. The irony of this case was that the cats were not really injured. We didn't really have the evidence that we normally have in these cases where it's a for sure slam dunk thing. Unfortunately, we used a private vet that time because it was off hours, it was a holiday, it was New Year's, and the vet that we dealt with didn't really know how to do forensic work and really couldn't commit to the animal cruelty, to the injury part. That's why it is so vital that you identify your vets and you work with them and you develop that expertise together. And you rely on them and you depend on them, because without them, you really don't have a case. Luckily for us, he was on probation, and we're able to send him back to prison for 4 years over cats, right? Who would have thought? Again, a great investigative tool. You don't have to be passionate about animals, but you do have to be passionate about wanting to do a thorough investigation and using every tool in your disposal to enforce the law. And if I could send somebody back to prison, especially somebody like this that did this horrific act over this, I'll consider that a win, right? Right, so photographs are always good, like I mentioned, recorded statements. We, in LAPD, what we do is when somebody is in jail, we monitor their phone calls because we know they're going to call their mama, their wife, whoever, and they're going to say some incriminating things on the phone. We record those conversations. We take them to court. It's good. I mean, it's almost like a confession, right? It's almost like having an informant in the prison or something telling you what happened or what they confessed to. Very good stuff. And of course, we took his shoes. Forensic evidence. We take the shoes, we take the clothes, we treat it like a very serious crime because of that threshold. You always want to prove beyond the preponderance, right? And sometimes you don't have it, and that's good too. Sometimes when you think you have animal cruelty, you may not because it doesn't fit the elements, and that's okay too, because you'll get into the habit of always doing things the same way over and over and over. And, if that person is innocent, that's okay. If they didn't do it, it's okay. But as long as you continue with best practices. Okay, I just want to go on to a case of domestic violence. And I'm going to just go over this really briefly. Again, another call out, we respond off hours. A very common theme in domestic violence, at least with us. And one of my specialties as a detective was domestic violence. I also did some time with sexual assaults, human trafficking, undercover work. With LAPD, we do a lot of specialties. You do general crimes, but you also focus on certain things, and you become very good at it. And domestic violence in LAPD, some of these cases are so common. A common thing that happens is the husband goes out, he goes drinking, he gets upset, he gets mad, he comes home and he beats the wife, right? Happens all the time in LA at least. A lot of the reports almost read the same, except for the injuries, right? In this case, what happened is they went out happy. They went out to dinner, he started drinking, and he's one of these violent drunks. He's not a happy drunk, he's a violent drunk. So when he drinks, he gets violent. And so there was some violence that went on in the restaurant. She left him there, goes back home, falls asleep. He had to walk home because she took the car. But she was already asleep. By the time he gets home, he is upset. He's really upset. So he goes into the room, and he gets her dog, because they're not married, they're a couple, and violently throws it against the wall. Dog dies instantly. He's really upset, extremely upset, where he gets a knife. And God knows what he was going to do with this knife. But if it wasn't for the son, and it's not his son, she's single parent, for the young son's intervention, who knows what would have happened, right? So we do our investigation, we do take a domestic violence report, and we cover the cycle of violence, and we document the injuries, and we get the recorded statements, and we do things by the numbers. But we also do an animal cruelty investigation. Anybody want to guess what he got convicted of? He got convicted of animal cruelty. A lot of our cases end up that way. We have a crime against a human, and the conviction is animal cruelty. It happens over and over and over again. That's why this is a great tool. And if you can remove a violent person with this tool, the better. She didn't come to court, by the way, as most of them don't. Common theme: domestic violence, yes. Violent offender, yes. Alcohol, drug abuse, yes. Very common. So what we have as well in the United States, we have a lot of soldiers coming back from service in the military. They have something that's called, some of them come back with a lot of post-traumatic stress disorders, right? Some of them, and some of them act out. Again, it's the behavior and it's the whole holistic approach that we want to take to, get this person right. Especially if somebody has served the country and is dealing with mental issues, stress issues, you want to help them. And some of this animal cruelty is not by locking people up. It's by getting them help, whatever help that they need. That's why it's not just LAPD issue, it's a societal issue. In this case, he was upset because he had gotten married in the service. He was deployed to Japan. We have a base in Japan, and where he met his beautiful wife, a Japanese a model, actually, and he ended up marrying her. He brings her back to the States in some desert place, and things don't go well over there. There's some domestic violence. He starts losing it mentally. Some of the post-traumatic stress disorder comes out. Domestic violence comes out. The military, police is involved. And what ends up happening is she gets tired of the behavior and she leaves him. She goes back to Japan, where he is so upset that he keeps on making threats against her over the phone. He's convinced that she is a spy, a Japanese spy, and you can't convince him otherwise. He's for sure she's a spy. Well, the dog that she had, that he gave her during their marriage, was left behind with him. Unfortunately, the dog reminded him of her, and so he decided that he was going to take this battle axe here that you see and try to kill the dog. So he tries, and unfortunately he did injure the dog pretty bad. But again, common theme in our cases: domestic violence, yes; mental illness, yes; drug, alcohol abuse, yes. Now, you can't help but to wonder, what would have happened if she would have remained in that marriage, or if she wouldn't have gone away for her own safety. She probably could have ended up just injured like the dog, or even worse. So you do have to take these cases seriously. And even though they were in the service, we still owe it to them to get them right, to give them the help so that they stop this behavior. Okay, so this is some photographs of kind of like the aftermath. It was a very bloody scene, because that battle axe was pretty dull, except for the spike at the end. But with our case, we treat it. We take photographs, we collect the evidence, we took the axe into evidence, we had it analyzed for blood. Even though we know that was the instrument, we still have to do things by the numbers. We still have to prove our case. So, like I said, after a while, you kind of do things all the time the same way, and it's almost automatic. Okay, so what happened in this case, he pled guilty in court. Many of our suspects, when they go to court, they plead guilty. They don't even want to chance it. So they, even before prelim, you know, even though I'm like a subject matter expert, right, and I'm ready to testify and I'm ready to, you know, to put my case on, a lot of times I don't, because they always plea out. They always take a deal. And sometimes for the you know, for the greater good, because they do get offered services and they do get services that they need. Again, it's a team effort. You know, everybody is involved in this: prosecutors, vets, animal services. We rely on another. Without each other, we can't do this case. And one of the last cases I want to talk about real quick is this case. His last name is Butts. This person was upset because he didn't have a job and his wife went to work and she had him take care of their 2-year-old son, right? So he's upset and he sees her cat, doesn't like the cat. He puts it in a bag, and it's the type of bag where you put blankets inside that has a zipper, right? Are you guys familiar with that bag? Do you have it here? It's like a quilt bag, yes? Okay, so he gets the cat, he puts it in there, and it's a cat in a bag. Really, that's what it is. Well, he throws it from one building to the other building, right? It's around 4 stories that he throws this cat, you know, to its death, really. This is kind of shows you where the cat was, where it landed. The cat lived. Actually, it was incredible because you see this cat rolling in this bag, and it's moving this bag around, and people are wondering, what is that? What's moving? What's inside this bag? So they called the police, they called the fire department. We responded, and actually what you're seeing up there, and this gives you a perspective of the lengths that we went through to save this cat. This is an abandoned building. Nobody lives in it. The only access was through the fire escape, through the ladders of the fire department. Fireman goes up there, he puts the cat in, now from the bag to the box, and they bring him down and they save him. The cat was fine. There was nothing wrong with the cat. Do we have a case at this point, you know, an animal cruelty case? Yeah, I think so. You know, it may not get filed because you don't really have an injury, and our prosecutors like to see injuries on our animals, but you really don't need it. And again, what are the warning signs here, you know, that you're seeing? Is the behavior disturbing to you? You know, the answer should be yes, it is disturbing to me. And especially that if you were to find out that this person also has a 2-year-old that he's taking care of, I mean, what if it was the child that got put in this bag and thrown off that? It easily could have happened. So in this case, you know, early on, we didn't know who the cat belonged to. It didn't have a collar, it didn't have a chip. We treated it just like any case that we have, you know. We did a lot of canvassing. We actually took the bag and we had it fingerprinted to try to find prints. We couldn't find prints. The bag had a sticker from a store, and we figured out that store was from the local area. So we went, we kind of found the store where the bag belonged to. So we kind of suspected that, of course, they lived nearby. So we put out flyers. Show you the flyer there. So we put out this flyer to kind of help get the community involved and try to get them to help us identify whoever did this. And of course, unbeknownst to the girlfriend, the wife, she comes home and her cat's missing, right? And she talks to her husband and says, "Hey, where's my cat?" And of course he says, "I don't know. I don't know where your cat is." You know, we knew where the cat was because, you know, we had it. Well, she saw this. Also, neighbors of hers saw this flyer, called us and said, "Yeah, I think your guy lives in, you know, this apartment. You might want to go talk to him." We did. We door knock. We have our recorders on. They don't know we do. We don't wear uniforms. In fact, we wear civilian clothes. It's not really undercover. We call it plain clothes. And the reason we do that is because people are more comfortable to talk to you when you're not in uniform. In this case, we door knocked. It was a great kind of surreptitious interview because we got him to say a lot of things that were contradictory in itself. And eventually, when we ended up getting a warrant and arresting him, we went back to his jail cell, we took him out, we interrogated him to the point where he admitted to putting the cat in the bag and throwing it because he was upset. His life was going nowhere, he was unhappy with himself, and was upset that he had to feed this cat. Another theme, right? Displace anger. Yeah, displace anger. Did we prevent a catastrophe in this case? I like to think so. He went back to prison. He was also on probation. So that was good for us. Lastly, I do want to mention dog and cockfighting. Just briefly, I know we're probably going to cover a little bit more. We also investigate this. I tend to gravitate more towards the violent behavior than this, although this does merit attention. Do we have anybody here who investigates organized crime? Gangs, right? No? Okay, well, blood sports is organized crime. It's a high dollar business. These people are in it for the money. They're not in it for the animals. They couldn't care less about these animals. Excuse me. So there are many cases that we have where we go in and the amount of money that's there when we do these busts is incredible. Great revenue source for the city, for the country, because it goes, in our case, it goes to a general fund when we take these proceeds. And it is very violent behavior. A lot of times in these blood sports, what you're going to find is you're going to find guns, you're going to find large quantity of money, large quantity of narcotics. You're going to find tons of evidence, as well as the animals that really should not be there. I said, if you ever seen a dog fight from beginning to end, it takes a special person to actually sit there and watch the whole thing because it's very bloody. It's not something that most people could tolerate. And like I said, these people don't care about these animals. If they don't perform, they kill them. Simple as that. But I am just about done with my presentation. Is there any questions that you have that you would like to ask? Yes. Yeah, she speaks English.
Question. You said that in order to prove a case, you need the animal to have some serious injuries. Is intent not enough? Since it was clear that guy's intent with the cat was to kill the cat. Even if the cat was not injured, is intent not enough?
No, a lot of times what happens is with a lot of our cases, if we cannot prove the animal was injured, yes, you could still proceed with the case. You could try to still convince the prosecutor to file the case, but chances are that they may not. But however, sometimes depending on the person, the prosecutor, they might want to take that case because of the other issues that are going on. So when I say that, it didn't have injuries, therefore it wasn't filed, it doesn't mean that it's still not a viable case. It's just that it's not one of our stronger cases. Hopefully that answered the question. Is there any other question?
Maybe I can help what I can say. There's not a clear zone between animal neglect and welfare. It depends on the state, it depends on the country. Scientifically, we say that where abuse begins is where welfare ends. So treating the cat in that way is not responding to the welfare of the cat. So we can say that it's the first stage of neglect. It's not abuse, but it's the first stage. It's what we call the gray zone. I'll speak about it later on.
Yes, and actually, part of the elements of animal cruelty, right, is the intentional maiming, mutilating, torturing of an animal. There are some prosecutors that would focus on the torturing part of that element of that crime and proceed with the filing. And we, as investigators, it is our job sometimes to give the prosecutors the tools that they need to charge that. For instance, if we do more, when we request a report from the vets, if we get a vet report, in this case we did, and have them explain that by placing this cat in this bag in the manner that it was placed, with the suffocation, with the temperature, with the weight it was, that in itself constituted animal cruelty. And yes, it does. You know, and you know, sometimes you just, yeah, our job is to put a case together, present it for filing, and then it's the other team now, the prosecutors, that determine whether or not they feel they could win in court, and whether or not they're going to charge it.
Hector,
Yes.
so in other parts of the U.S., just doing that would be cruelty. In my state, I would prosecute that with or without the injury, because my statute allows me to do that. And you would put the vet on the stand to talk about, you know, throwing an animal for stories is in and of itself inhumane treatment, cruelty itself.
Yeah. And again, in that case, as my memory serves me correct, we did get a conviction on that, so it was a good thing. Any more questions?
Για τους ανηλίκους που είπατε προηγουμένως, γνωρίζουμε από τις ταινίες ότι υπάρχουν κάποιοι ψυχολόγοι στα σχολεία που παρακολουθούν κατά καιρούς τα παιδιά. Είναι υποχρεωτικό να παρακολουθούνται από ψυχολόγους? Και αν ναι, εντοπίζουν αυτοί κάποιο πρόβλημα στα παιδιά για να σας ενημερώσουν? Επιπλέον, αυτοί οι ανήλικοι όταν θα μπουν σε κάποια κλινική, θα πάρουν την αγωγή τους και θα έρθουν σε μια φυσιολογική κατάσταση ψυχολογική, από εσάς μετά παρακολουθούνται για την πορεία της ζωής τους? Γιατί υποτίθεται πως είναι κολαπληματίες, κάτι όπως μας λέτε. Ευχαριστώ.
Yes, I understand your question. So if I understand it correctly, you're asked if within the school district, would that child be identified as having needs, mental illness needs, that need to be addressed? And if so, in the future, are they monitored to make sure that they're being treated and this thing is not going to evolve into a violent behavior, correct? Is that more or less what you asked? Yes? Okay. Unfortunately, some school districts are better than others in identifying behavior. A lot of these issues is really up to the parent initially, especially really young. It's up to trained teachers. We don't really have psychologists embedded in schools. But we do have, the school officials do have the ability to suggest it to the parents that they get their child evaluated for like a mental illness disorder. Sometimes some mental illness disorders are caught early on in life. Others you cannot detect till they reach a certain age. So it is very difficult. And even in our system, like I said, we don't have the perfect system where we see somebody and we say, oh, this person needs mental illness help, we're going to get them that. A lot of people and kids fall through the cracks, unfortunately. But some of that responsibility does fall on the parents to get treatment for their child. And one of the things that we have luckily in our division under Captain Moldorfer's command is the mental evaluation unit, which does great things in terms of preventing these issues from happening, and maybe she could address some of those.
Yes. As Detective Sanchez said, I also have a mental health unit where we are co-deployed with one officer and one mental health clinician or psychiatric nurse, depending on what shift they're on. But anyway, when one of these children come to our attention where we believe that mental illness played a part in their behavior, we do have them assessed, and we put their name into our database. So we will always know in the future, even if the person is 50 years old and they had a contact with the Los Angeles Police Department mental health teams, we will have that information. It'll tell us who the doctor was, what they were diagnosed with, what the incident was that generated police response. It's a lot of information that we have at our fingertips. And then, beyond that, we also follow these cases in our system. We have detectives and a clinician who are teamed up together in one car, who then follow up with the family, make sure that the client is getting their mental health services. They have a medical plan, that they are taking their medication, and that they've gotten linked to all of the social services that will help this family deal with the mental illness piece. So as Detective Sanchez mentioned, some do fall through the cracks, that's true. However, if they come to the police department's attention, we do follow up, and we do have the ability to then track or follow their progress for the rest of their life.
Ήθελα να προσθέσω κάτι, επειδή δούλεψα πολλά χρόνια στις ΗΠΑ με τέτοια θέματα. Τα περισσότερα σχολεία έχουν σχολικούς ψυχολόγους ή σχολικούς συμβούλους, αλλά υπάρχουν δύο τρόποι που μπορεί να υπάρξει ψυχολογική διάγνωση και παρακολούθηση. Ο ένας είναι ο εθελοντικός, αν κάποιος από την οικογένεια ζητάει βοήθεια και ακολουθεί τις συστάσεις. Ο άλλος είναι μη εθελοντικός, με δύο τρόπους. Όταν διαπιστώνεται υποψία, όχι διαπιστωμένο, όταν υπάρχει υποψία κακοποίησης ανηλίκου, έχουν υποχρέωση οι εκπαιδευτικοί, η ειδική ψυχικής υγείας, το ιατρικό προσωπικό και η αστυνομία να συμπληρώσουν μια αναφορά που είναι καταγγελία για υποψία κακοποίησης. Όταν γίνεται αυτή η καταγγελία, πηγαίνει στις κοινωνικές υπηρεσίες και οι κοινωνικές υπηρεσίες διερευνούν με κοινωνικούς λειτουργούς τι συμβαίνει στην περίπτωση αυτή και πολλές φορές ζητάνε να υπάρχει διάγνωση, ψυχολογική διάγνωση και παρακολούθηση. Μερικές φορές δίνουν επιλογή αν υπάρχει κάποιο αδίκημα και λένε και στον θήτη, κοιτάξτε, μπορεί να πάτε φυλακή ή μπορεί να είστε στο πλένο on probation και να έχετε ψυχοθεραπευτική βοήθεια. Και τους δίνουν επιλογή και πρέπει να την ακολουθήσουν και αν δεν την ακολουθήσουν τότε πάνε φυλακή εφόσον έχουν καταδικαστεί. Αλλά αυτός είναι ο μηχανισμός παρακολούθησης και πώς μπορούν να μπουν και να μείνουν στο σύστημα της ψυχικής υγείας.
Yes, thank you for clearing that up. You're absolutely correct. So in closing, you know, one of the things that... oh, more questions? Perfect. I mean, is it okay with time-wise? We're good? Okay, please.
Το μεταφραστή, παρακαλώ. Καλησπέρα πλέον και από μένα. Αστιφύλακας Δάντος Γεώργιος, υπηρετός του ΑΛΦΑ Ταφλαβρίου. Επί 3 συναπτά έτη περίπου ασχολούμαι με υποθέσεις κακοποίησης ζώων, οποιοδήποτε είδους. Ένα αίτιο που βλέπω σε αυτές τις υποθέσεις είναι η μόδα της εποχής στην Ελλάδα. Δηλαδή, ότι ο καθένας έχει γίνει της μόδας να έχει σκύλο. Αποτέλεσμα, όταν περάσει αυτή η μόδα, να παραμελεί ή να εγκαταλείπει το σκύλο. Πράγμα το οποίο αποτελεί είδος κακοποίησης, σύμφωνα με την ελληνική νομοθεσία. Ένα άλλο χαρακτηριστικό παράδειγμα είναι στην επαρχία, όπου οι άνθρωποι, εθιμοτυπικά θα έλεγα, παραμελούν περισσότερο τα ζώα. Η ερώτηση που έχω να κάνω είναι η εξής. Πιστεύετε ότι η κακοποίηση αυτού του είδους στα ζώα οφείλεται περισσότερο στην ψυχοσύνθεση του ατόμου ή της κοινωνίας της οποίας ζουν? Ευχαριστώ.
That's a hard question to answer. We have that happen in the United States as well. You know, people fall in love with a puppy, the puppy grows up, or whatever pet animal, rabbits, you know, duck, chicken, whatever you think. So they get this pet. They love this pet. The pet grows up, it gets uncontrollable. They don't know what to do with it. They end up abandoning it, giving it away. Sometimes it might lead to animal cruelty. But more often than not, the animal gets abandoned. Now, I only focused on the violent aspects of animal cruelty. In fact, there is a lot of laws in the United States that deal with specific issues like that. There's actually ordinances and penal codes that make it illegal for somebody to abandon their dog and just leave it out there. Once you take ownership of a pet, you own it, and by the penal code, you are responsible for that care of that animal. So to answer your question in a way, it is a form of animal cruelty, and we rely on the Department of Animal Services to address those issues, because a lot of them are humane issues. Not necessarily for the police department, but for our animal services to address. And that's why, again, it's very important that you do this with other departments, because if you just do it with law enforcement, you're not going to have the resources. There's no department that could deal with both aspects. And in fact, you do need animal services because they're the ones who have the veterinarians who give the medical care. They have the storage for the animals. They could put them and feed them. The police department does not. Whether it's a societal issue, a fad, I really can't answer that. I know we have that problem, and it could be a fad. I know it was a fad with Dalmatians, right? When 101 Dalmatians came out, the cartoon or the movie, what happened with Dalmatians? Everybody wanted a Dalmatian as a puppy, right? They're beautiful dogs, but they're very high energy dogs. So once they grow up, what happens? They can't control them, you know, and they end up abandoning them or giving them away. So in that sense, yeah, it is a fad.
Να προσθέσω κάτι για την ερώτηση αυτή, επειδή είναι σημαντική νομίζω. Νομίζω πως υπάρχουν ομοκεντρικοί κύκλοι, οπότε είναι η στάση της κοινωνίας γενικά και η σχέση της κοινωνίας με τα ζώα, έτσι, και υπάρχουν τα κατοικίδια και υπάρχουν τα ζώα της φάρμας ή εργασίας, έτσι, και μετά υπάρχει η στάση της μικρότερης κοινότητας μέσα στην οποία ζει κάποιος, μετά υπάρχει η στάση της συγκεκριμένης οικογένειας σε σχέση με τα ζώα, και μετά υπάρχει όντως η ψυχοσύνθεση του συγκεκριμένου ατόμου. Και νομίζω είναι όλοι αυτοί οι τέσσερις παράγοντες που παίζουν πάντα σε κάθε περιστατικό. Οπότε, αν σε μια κοινωνία γενικά δεν αγαπάμε ή δεν περιποιούμαστε τα ζώα ή είμαστε άσχετοι με τα ζώα, αυτό ενθαρρύνει νομίζω στο ατομικό επίπεδο να υπάρχει περισσότερη παραμέληση και κακοποίηση και αντιστρόφως.
Okay, one of the things that we really didn't get into, and we're actually not going to go into it too much, but I don't want to forget about this piece, is community education. Los Angeles, and of course the United States, is a melting pot of cultures. We have so many different cultures there, and there is treatment of animals that in certain cultures that are okay are accepted in one country, but maybe not accepted in another. So education of the community is really important to teach people. Maybe they don't realize because they've always treated their work animal a certain way. Well, now in today's climate, it's inappropriate. We consider it cruelty rather than put them into the judicial system or arrest them, maybe in some of these incidences where it's just perhaps ignorance of the law and it's just the way it's always been done, or it's closely tied to their culture. That's where education, law enforcement educating the community as to what is acceptable, what is not. And again, looking at a more holistic approach. You could arrest them, perhaps you could. Is that the best way to do it? Perhaps not. Maybe it's better just to educate them about the law and about what society deems as acceptable treatment of animals in this society. So I just wanted to cover that a little bit. We didn't really talk about that, but we do a lot of community education because we do have a variety of different cultures who have different traditions, some that involve animal sacrifice, some that involve just the general treatment of animals, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Yes.
Στην Ελλάδα, σε πολλές περιπτώσεις κακοποίησης ζώων, έχουμε πρόβλημα με τους μάρτυρες. Πολλοί ξέρουν, αλλά κανείς δεν μιλάει. Είτε επειδή δεν θέλουν να μπλέξουν με τη γραφειοκρατία, με την αστυνομία και τις καταγγελίες, είτε σε πολύ μικρά μέρη, σε χωριά, δεν θέλουν να έχουν πρόβλημα με τους γείτονες ή με τους συγγενείς. Εσείς πώς δουλεύετε σε αυτό το τομέα? Τι κάνετε για να προσεγγίσετε τους μάρτυρες, κυρίως σε περιπτώσεις που έχετε υποψίες ή υπάρχουν και αποδείξεις?
That's a very good question, and it's a problem that we in law enforcement encounter quite often, right? It doesn't really matter what the crime is, whether it be animal cruelty, sexual assaults, murder. We do have members of the community that are going to be reluctant to come forward in any crime. And it's really difficult to assure them that no harm is going to come to them, that there's not going to be any reprisals. The great thing about animal cruelty is that, and hopefully you caught this, is that the victim is the city of LA. We don't make the owner, the pet owner, or, anybody else the victim. So we assume the role of the victim for the animal because the animal can't speak, right? So we have to be their advocate. And through expert testimony, through subject matter experts, through vets, through people who could testify in court on the behalf of the animal, sometimes we don't need witnesses. And in a lot of our cases, like I mentioned earlier, we don't even make it to court because they plea out before we go to court. So we get a conviction, so nobody ever testifies in court. On the other opposite part of that spectrum is the willingness for people to come forth. I mean, we have so much attention on these cases and so much passion that on other crimes where people are reluctant to come forward, for some reason with animal cruelty, they do come forward. So don't underestimate, your witnesses. You might say, no, that will never happen. It happens, A lot of it is for the investigator to assure your witnesses to cooperate, in the investigation, maybe convince them that they're doing it for the greater whole of the society, because it's a societal issue. And once you start educating the community about the seriousness of animal cruelty, I'm hoping that people will acknowledge that. And we have the same problem. But there's a lot of times when we have something that, that's unusual. For example, and I'll share this example with you because I think it goes to the heart of the matter. We have a gang problem in Los Angeles, particularly in South Los Angeles, right? If you're in a gang, one of the things that you do not do in a gang at the risk of your own life is give information to the police on your gang or another gang for that reason. You just don't do that. We had a case where this was members of the same gang. There was a dispute between them to the point where one of the gang members got a gun, went up to the guy's dog, and shot it and killed it. He called the police. A lot of times they don't. They kind of just work it out amongst themselves. He called the police. He convinced his family members to cooperate in the investigation. And we did the investigation, we did the ballistics, we ended up recovering the projectile in the ground because it was a through and through from the dog. We buried it, got the projectile, we searched for the gun, we didn't find it, but through testimony from that individual, we did get that, and we were successful. And this person had every reason in the world not to cooperate with us. But for some odd reason, when it comes to animal crimes, and I've investigated all sorts of crimes, from human trafficking, which is, I think, one of the worst crimes to investigate because it's human sexual exploitation, sometimes of minors. When I got to animal cruelty, it was a really surreal experience for me because now I had people wanting to cooperate in these investigations, where in crimes against humans, they did not. So it is a very odd dynamic that occurs. But in this case, if I had to give an opinion why this person cooperated with us, is because I think as humans, we draw the line somewhere, right? Some people draw it with domestic violence, some people draw it with, child abuse. Some people draw it with animal cruelty. They see the defenselessness of these creatures, and they said, you know what? Yeah, I could handle the child abuse, the domestic violence, the murders, but this is where I draw the line, and it's animal cruelty for me, and I'm going to cooperate with the police. And they do. So it does happen, and this person actually ended up he went to prison. We got a conviction on him, and as far as I know, this person who we call a ratting, who ratted on this guy, is still alive. So